All right, we're joined by Nathan King, Auburn Undercover, 247 Sports Network. Nathan, thank you so much for joining us in person.
Yeah, of course. Good to meet you guys. Been doing your show here for
Yeah.
a couple years, meeting Shane for the first time, so good to be here.
And obviously, Hugh Freeze, one of the biggest storylines here at Media Days, and it's night and day different with the optimism. But what is realistic expectations, do you think, for Auburn year one under Hugh Freeze?
Sure. So, as you guys know, the schedules are never kind to Auburn. That's kind of what you agree to in the SEC West, soon to be, obviously, divisionless. But, you look at strength of schedules, Auburn's always near the top. And so I think this year things play out pretty favorably if you're looking at a year one for a head coach, because if you go on the road and you beat Cal, which Auburn is playing for the first time this season, week 2 in Berkeley, you do that, you're going to be 4-0 in the non-con. And then you pick up a couple SEC wins, you'll be back to a bowl game. And I know that's not where Auburn fans want to be long term. Like, obviously they want to be doing a lot more than a bowl game, but you guys know as well as anybody the depths they fell to. Not only their record under Brian Harsin, but the roster was just obviously in shambles. And so I was wondering what next year was going to look like when Hugh Freeze was hired. Obviously thought he was a really good coach, thought it was a good fit, thought it was a good hire. The transfer portal is what turned me around. The work they did in about 3 months' time, I hesitate to say flip the roster, but really improve a ton of different positions, and then they went and got themselves an actual quarterback, really made me think, okay, this team can win 7 games next year. Again, not the long-term expectation. Freeze has talked about it many times. 12-team playoff is maybe something you could see like a 9-3 Auburn get in pretty often. That's what they want in the long term, but I think at this point 6 or 7 wins is definitely sort of a baseline expectation for this team.
Is it too hard to know what the offense will be with all the moving parts? But with Philip Montgomery coming in there, I'm excited to see if they run that Baylor-style offense. Everywhere he's been, highly, highly productive quarterbacks. May not have that type of year this year at Auburn, but Hugh Freeze is saying, Ashford and Thorne, we got 2 guys we can play with here. What do you think the offense will look like this year?
Yeah, I'm glad you bring up Montgomery. I mean, that's not something that's talked about enough. I think that is a really good fit when you talk about what they want to do on offense. Good fit with what Hugh Freeze has done in the past. And everywhere you look, like you mentioned, he's had good quarterback play. I mean, I know it's a while ago, but Robert Griffin III turned out pretty well. Case Keenum obviously did a bunch. But even at Tulsa, you look at some of the quarterbacks he had there, extreme productivity on offense. And so I think Thorne fits into that system really, really well. They do need to have a good ground game to complement it. And obviously a big storyline this week was the availability of Jarquez Hunter. That's such a murky situation. We still don't have any clarity on that. But if he's unavailable even for just a couple games, that's going to be a big blow to them, obviously replacing Tank Bigsby. To me, where I come back to and put a big focus on for this team, as you guys know, offensive line has been, it's been so inconsistent for this Auburn team. They've had good quarterbacks cycle in. Jarrett Stidham was an NFL quarterback. Bo Nix is going to be an NFL quarterback, and they're just running for their lives. It's been a really, really inconsistent O-line for this team. They bring in 3 transfers, 3 of the top 10 24/7 offensive linemen at center, at left tackle, and right tackle. In the spring, those guys slotted right in. I think they have a chance to one of their better O-lines, maybe since 2018, 2017. I think this can be a really good offensive line for them, and so I think that's probably the point that you're looking at on the offense and saying where can they take the biggest step forward next season. But in terms of meshing, you guys heard Hugh Freeze talk about it. It is Philip Montgomery's show. It's kind of the standard play calling setup that you see a lot of the time. It's his show, but Hugh Freeze reserves the right to come in and change some things every once in a while. So I thought it was funny because it was a little bit different than the previous day when I forget what Jimbo's words were, but he probably will call plays. Yeah, he'll probably have control of the offense. I was like, all right, already off to a great start with that relationship. So yeah, I'm interested to see how their offense grows together.
Hey, if you were a gambling man, who would you say would be the quarterback the final week of Auburn's year?
Yeah, it's tough for me to not say Peyton Thorne at this point. 7 times the number of career touchdown passes that Robbie Ashford has. You're talking 49 to 7 last year for Ashford. And to give proper context and credit where credit is due for Robbie Ashford last year, number one, dealt with every injury you could even name from head to toe because he was a guy that, look, there wasn't much working. He was putting his body on the line. A really good athlete who could run the ball. Number two, we just talked about it. They didn't have a great O-line. He didn't have much help in that department. And another position group we haven't talked about is receiver that I think they've really upgraded in the transfer portal. He didn't have a number 1 guy. I don't even know if he had a number 2 or a number 3 guy. And so you looked at the group coming back this year, you're saying they don't have a lot of alphas at receiver. And so it was tough last year for Ashford. Like, he's in a better position to succeed. Let's say he is the starter. I think he will have a much better season under Hugh Freeze. And it was sort of a, square hole, round peg sort of situation. Yeah. Brian Harsin, adaptability was not necessarily in their vocabulary there for a couple years within that offense. And so they kept trying to pound that in there with Robbie Ashford, and it wasn't necessarily working to what they wanted to do, and they didn't really adapt very well. But, yeah, I'd have to go with Thorne. He's already made great impressions. I mean, just talking to some players yesterday, he's already made great impressions within that building. Robbie's a great kid, though, and he's going to give him a fight because he, again, you can be the best pocket passer in the world, but Robbie can do some things that he can't. And so I'm interested to see what that looks like over the course of fall camp. Freeze said, give us about 10 practices and we'll cut the battle down to 2. We presume that's going to be Thorne and Ashford. It's just tough for me at this point with all the improvements they made on offense to not say, it'll be Peyton Thorne. I think that'll be a good thing. I think they'll be much better at quarterback than they were last year.
Well, covering Auburn, going from Brian Harsin to Hugh Freeze, isn't that just like a dream scenario? I mean, you could sprinkle a little Lane Kiffin in there here in the offseason. How awesome is this I don't know, this rejuvenation of Auburn?
Yeah, I mean, it started under Cadillac is the thing. Like, there's you mentioned those coaches. There's another one in there as well.
Yeah, that's true.
What a surreal end to last season that was. You're having Auburn play these, like, inconsequential games. They're already clearly not going to a bowl game. And people have talked about it over and over again, but that Texas A&M home game, I mean, unbelievable. Like, I had to leave the press box before it started because I just had to see them run on the field. I mean, it was just amazing. And so the way they kind of rallied there, that was such a good starting point. And Freeze did the smart thing. One of my buddies on the beat made a good point. When they were looking for any coach, he said, the one thing this coach has to do is tweet a picture, like, shaking hands in his office with Cadillac. Automatic win, day one. Like, you have to have it. He did almost that exact thing. Like, the night he was hired, it was like Cadillac's the associate head coach, and he posted a picture with him and everything. And so, fans were obviously going to be really mad if that didn't happen. But, Freeze's fit at Auburn, I think, is a word that gets thrown around a lot. Because I was in the camp, as I'm sure many people were, that thought Lane Kiffin would be an interesting hire. No reason to think his offenses wouldn't be good. No reason to think he wouldn't do a good job and contend in the West with the talent that Auburn has. Would he have been a 3-year rental? What happens if the Texas job comes open, or what happens if Freeze is in a position where, and he's talked about it this week, he only had a handful of jobs that he really wanted to leave Liberty for because he was chilling. He was obviously working off some of his past transgressions and just kind of laying under the spotlight. Auburn was obviously one of those. We saw earlier this week that Tennessee apparently had him in the mix. I would imagine that would be a job he would have gone for if that would have been an opportunity for him. But, you're talking about the difference in covering them. It's pretty night and day.
Yeah.
There was a lot of stuff working against Brian Harsin that was out of his control. But I do think the fit wasn't as good at Auburn, and I don't think he necessarily had as great of a grasp of kind of what you need to do on the day in and day out. And I'm not just talking about schmoozing boosters and stuff. That's obviously part of it. But look, somebody like Gus Malzahn didn't even like doing that. He just wanted to coach football, and he was still pretty successful at times as well. But I think Hugh Freeze, I kind of compare him a little bit to the fit that Bruce Pearl is for Auburn basketball. Just kind of knows what you need to do, and he's done a good job this offseason of even building up that goodwill within the fan base and sort of setting realistic expectations. Like, hey, you guys should be excited about A, B, and C, but we'll see what happens when we get on the field. Like, knowing the kind of uphill battle they've got, knowing the talent gap they have to close with Georgia and Alabama. They're still a long ways away, but I think he's done a good job of setting realistic expectations and just saying, look, we'll take this thing one day at a time and see where it gets us once we get back and better in recruiting and kind of see where it gets us down the road.
Well, I love tweeting out a lot of troll shit. And one of my favorite from last year, Cadillac Williams 1-0 versus Jimbo Fisher. That's
factual.
Yeah, right.
You're not lying to anybody.
I just love that. But what an atmosphere that was. But speaking of that Ole Miss game, how bad do you think that Auburn fan base wants to beat Lane Kiffin? Who knows how close that really was? But
sure.
I think there's some serious bad blood between the fans, and even seems like Hugh Freeze and Lane Kiffin. Of course, everyone's got bad blood with Lane Kiffin. It seems like at times. You know what?
Yeah, and sometimes it's fabricated on Kiffin's part. I am excited to talk to Kiffin tomorrow. He's thrown some jabs, some lighthearted jabs at Freeze, like the day he got hired, when Freeze was saying that he thinks Auburn is a better job than Ole Miss. Kiffin responding to that. He knows how to play that up. Talking about how close it was, I can say it was very close. I remember sitting in my brother's dorm room on the campus of the University of Alabama before the Iron Bowl, and sort of sifting through that and realizing Kiffin's fallen off here, and Hugh Freeze is way up here. And then you cut to 48 hours later, and they've hired Hugh Freeze. And so I believe it was down to those two, and they ended up deciding on Hugh Freeze. Who knows if Kiffin would have taken the job, but I know for a fact that the only offer was extended to Hugh Freeze. No offer was extended to Lane Kiffin. Obviously, he signs the extension there. I'm glad you bring up that game, though, because that's one obviously they have Georgia and Alabama at home. Like, you got to circle those games. But that's a huge, huge game for them this season, I think, because if we're breaking down the schedule, you could go 4-0 in the non-con. There's 2 SEC games you have to have. You go to Vanderbilt. I think they're better, like Clerkley a lot. You have to win that game.
Yeah.
And then you get Mississippi State at home, and for obviously all the wrong reasons. They're in a transition period. I think Auburn will be a good bit better than them. Have to win those 2 games. You look at that Ole Miss game. They play LSU, they play A&M, they play Georgia before that, and A&M's on the road. You could be 0-3 in the SEC. Sort of a backs against the wall, and then like you mentioned, you come home to Jordan-Hare, and you kind of just get to release some frustrations and just saying, we've got to go get an SEC win. I think that's really a good spot for them. I'm glad you bring that up about Kiffin. I've been saying the same thing where I think they will be really charged up, as much as Hugh Freeze maybe wants to downplay it, and I do think he enjoyed his tenure in Oxford for the most part, except for the way it ended. I think he'll be charged up about that game as well. I think the players will. And I think maybe some of the Lane Kiffin hate will be a bit fabricated as well, just because it's just a normal coaching search, and they just didn't hire the guy. But I do think you're right. I think Auburn fans will be like, yeah, we're out to get Lane Kiffin. When he didn't really do anything wrong. But I do think that'll be a really, really good environment. It was 2 years ago when Kiffin came and Auburn beat an Ole Miss team that I think was a good bit better than them and Jordan-Hare. I think that's a swing game. If you're talking about the difference between 6 and 7 wins, getting an Ole Miss team at home, I'll be interested to see what that team looks like this season. But getting them at home at a point of the year, midway through the season, where maybe your back is against the wall, maybe that's the difference between 6 and 7 wins for this Auburn team.
Well, I apprate your time, brother.
Yeah, of course. Appreciate
y'all.
For the
fans, can you please tell them where to find you?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you can find me on Thread. I'm just kidding. You can find Twitter at NathanKing247, and then AuburnUndercover.com. Our whole crew was here this week. It was fun. It's the first time I've ever been here for all 4 days. Going to be here tomorrow as well. And so it's been a lot of fun. AuburnUndercover.com. You guys can go get all that coverage.
All right. Thank you so much.
Appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much.